was the political trends with regard to digital assets over the last, say 2 years or so have seen more support overall from conservatives than from the left. Although, as Grant mentioned earlier, it's not exactly a party line issue yet. It was notable that this bill was bipartisan. In short, the bill did a few things, or would do a few things, notably effectively banning one's ability to self-custody digital assets. It would institute pretty onerous surveillance across the industry, particularly if one is going to be making meaningfully sized transactions that cross, international borders, or with a sort of party to that transaction that's, located internationally. It reintroduced the sort of FinCEN language on all of these different constituent aspects of the ecosystem being forced to register as money service businesses. Those of you who've been paying attention to digital asset policy for a while now will likely remember that this sort of language, as written, may seem sort of sensible to a policymaker who doesn't know much about the space. But in effect, this language could be read as an outright attempt to ban Bitcoin, mostly because the actors that the language says need to, file certain forms and report certain things about what users are doing, have no ability to comply. Yet they it's like a really Kafkaesque like workaround, right? They're not saying, "Oh, we want to ban this stuff." They're just saying, "Hey, you are the software developer of a iPhone wallet. That's fine, but you just need to tell us what everyone's doing with their Bitcoin." And of course, a software developer of a wallet has no idea what anyone's doing with their Bitcoin, and so they can't comply. So that stuff is obviously really, really scary. Similarly, the language would also, at least as I read it, outlaw the ability for one to run a node, which is really troubling. So I mean, yeah, all in all, it's kind of an attack on Bitcoin, an attack on privacy, on digital assets writ large, and it's probably unconstitutional. Coin Center put out a really good initial response that details some of that, along with our legal fellow Zach Shapiro, who's on stage right now. He also wrote a really good article focusing specifically on the sort of self-custody aspect of this. But yeah, in short, this DAAML bill is the most notable that's been proposed post FTX. It's really, really bad for Bitcoin and crypto writ large. It's unlikely to pass, but alarming that Warren was able to find a Republican senator to co-sponsor the bill.
Crazy. So, David, and we can open this up a little more. Is this an education issue? Is this something that can be remedied? Is it just ignorance, or is it something a little more sinister than that?
I think it's really hard to say with a straight face that this is ignorance. Although usually we it's best to presume ignorance over malice, but in this case, it's hard to understand how one could arrive at the language present in this bill without intending to do pretty serious harm to the industry and these ecosystems overall. When this sort of language appeared in the infrastructure bill in 2020, I think it was a lot of people sort of jumped to the conclusion that it was an attempt to ban crypto, to ban Bitcoin. Although I think, from my understanding and from conversations that we've had, I really don't believe that. I actually think the first time that this sort of language from FinCEN came out, it was probably not intending to trap all of these kind of constituent actors in the Bitcoin ecosystem into a double bind where they sort of are by nature of existing breaking the law. However, there was obviously massive pushback, not only from Bitcoin advocates, but also from the crypto lobbying presence overall in Washington, and a lot of education focused on these different actors in a blockchain ecosystem, node runners, software developers, wallet providers, etc. And so after that sort of onslaught of education and work on those issues, to see that reintroduced, especially by someone as crypto hostile as Senator Warren, it seems exceedingly likely that this was done with full knowledge of the implications.
Absolutely. Grant, go for it. You have something to add here?
Yeah. So I was actually able to speak with someone on the legislative side of Warren's team recently about this bill specifically, and obviously, uh, you take everything in these meetings with a grain of salt. And to David's point, I think we do have to judge, actions and what people show us just as much, if not more, as what they tell us. But I figured I'd just offer, a little bit of insight as to, what was discussed in this meeting and maybe how it relates to this. So, some of my big takeaways from the meeting, and one of the things that was continually stressed in the meeting was that, Elizabeth Warren has long been, quote unquote, fighting for the little guy, right? And really focused on consumer protections. As most people know, she's very kind of anti-bank, anti-big bank. And I think it's been confusing for a lot of Bitcoiners. And I actually brought this up in the meeting, right? It's been confusing for a lot of Bitcoiners that Warren would be so anti-bank and against the ways that the financial system has been corrupted and kind of used and abused everyday Americans, and also be anti-Bitcoin. One of the few things, one of the only things that can meaningfully stand up to our traditional banking system and offer a check and a balance on the existing financial infrastructure. And so I mentioned that. I go, how do you explain this dissonance, this incongruity? And the way they responded was essentially, we're not anti crypto necessarily. We just think that it should have to undergo the same regulation that the banking system already undergoes. So they basically said, as a country, we've generally agreed consumer protection is important, and the way we see that is through the codified legislation and regulation that emphasizes consumer protection, right? If you transact with your bank, your bank is partially liable for what goes on in and around your accounts, and they're there to kind of quote unquote protect you. And so they're looking at this through the lens of millions of Americans have gotten hurt by the FTX situation, by online scams, ransomware, and they're looking at this, and then they're also looking at, as we mentioned earlier, the predatory marketing, right? So the Super Bowl ads of Shiba Inu, Kim Kardashian, kind of advertising a pump and dump. They're looking at that and they're painting with a really broad brush, and they see that as the crypto industry. What I realized from the meeting was they actually don't have much knowledge about Bitcoin at all. They view crypto as a monolith, and Bitcoin doesn't really factor into their discussions a whole lot. Like, it's just one of the thousands of other cryptos that exist. So when you bring up, any of the benefits of Bitcoin, you bring up how Bitcoin has kind of been like the safe haven for marginalized and unbanked, underbanked communities around the world. At least the team I spoke with in the office, this was like a first for them hearing that. So again, you take it with a grain of salt. You might believe that they've heard these things before and they're choosing to go against it anyway. One of my partial takeaways from the meeting, though, was that clearly they're lumping Bitcoin in with everything else, and that causes them to view this industry as kind of wholly bad. And personally, if I didn't understand the nuance between Bitcoin and everything else, and I saw everything that was happening, and I saw $32 billion worth of value wipe off the face of the earth, overnight, in FTX, along with everything else that we've seen the last couple of years, the NFT market dropping 99%, all those things, I can see how you come to that conclusion. So is it malice? Is it ignorance? Potentially a little bit of both, but The big takeaway from them was, hey, we've got these regulations. We think crypto should follow them as well. And my main point of pushback, as you know, Zach, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well, because your piece on BPI was great. Is that, hey, some of these things, there's a difference in degree with crypto versus the banking system, and then there are fundamental differences in kind. And as soon as we get into some of the fundamental differences in kind of how Bitcoin operates compared to our existing banking system, it becomes incredibly clear that we can't just apply the same standards, because those same standards make no sense for certain aspects of Bitcoin.
Yeah, Grant, that's a great kind of insight there. I want to toss a question to Matt. I do want to hear Zach talk about his article that he wrote for us, but on the same subject of Senators Warren and Marshall's bill, Matt, obviously the U.S. government has an interest in countering adversaries who are using digital assets for nefarious ends, and similarly, the U.S. government has a blatant interest in curbing illicit finance and money laundering. And that was sort of the stated purpose of this DAAML bill. So could you talk for a little bit about, what the kind of federal government's framework might, look like when it comes to, or maybe what it should look like when it comes to curbing illicit finance and some of these things? Because it's obvious that those are priorities. And there's probably a way to craft policy that doesn't, sort of in a roundabout way neuter the entire industry. So could you talk a little bit about that kind of balance there, and maybe some things the government could do from a policy perspective? Like if you were to point Warren in the right direction, if you were meeting with her team and they're saying, hey, we want to curb illicit finance and all of this, what would you tell them?
Yes. Sorry, I'm driving now too, so apologies if my signal gets interrupted. So I think the key point is, what we've been hearing so thus far is the kind of the perspective on the Hill, where new legislation is often done, sort of explored from like the extremes, right? And then there's always like a process of accommodation and compromise and hopefully education to like reach an actually effective solution. Now that's maybe somewhat naive in the abstract, but in practice, that's sort of the way things typically go. So it's important to sort of look at how these bills come together and sort of try and, folks trying to mark out like a territory that they can claim on a certain sort of dimension. And then the compromises and the negotiations take place. And that's sort of how the machine works on the Hill. In the federal government, it's a kind of a very different both like mechanism and approach, right? And especially in kind of the national security and law enforcement bureaucracies, they actually have a lot of experience with Bitcoin and digital assets. And one of the kind of, I'd say, unfortunate side effects of that is that the folks inside the government that have the most experience, that are often turned to sort of to provide advice to their senior leadership, or often advice to staffers on the Hill, are the folks that have been working in this space since it was perceived principally as sort of dark web internet money, right? Sort of Silk Road style sorts of things, where kind of the presumption and sort of the mental model about thinking about the impact between Bitcoin and U.S. national security was very narrow, and that sort of law enforcement, national security, kind of illicit finance sort of lens. And I think only recently has its sort of monetization into like a macro asset that institutions and sovereign wealth funds and other folks, could start to take much more seriously, has sort of brought into conflict kind of that legacy mindset, that sort of narrow bureaucratic approach inside, it's very specific law enforcement and national security kind of bureaucratic offices, where they have a very particular remit. Their job is just to stop bad guys, and it doesn't really matter what the bad guys are using, whether it's the traditional finance system or Bitcoin or Monero or whatever. They see their job as just to stop the bad guys from doing the bad things, and that's kind of that's the only argument they need to win inside the machine, is just to say, okay, we have a legitimate, statutory authority to go after X, Y, and Z actors. and we're going to use whatever sort of sort of authorized means we have to sort of disrupt those actors' ability to conduct their operations, and that could be intercepting communications. It could be trying to provide like arrest warrants overseas, all sorts of things that sort of fall from that like high level vision of their role. And so this is sort of the problem that we have inside of kind of the security bureaucracies. This is sort of this many years of approach to this problem set has sort of I think ingrained a view that's very narrow. So the key is to sort of try to zoom out from that very narrow remit and try to think about Bitcoin from a much more longer term strategic perspective, and really trying to approach the real kind of costs and benefits to the US much more broadly, and actually force an assessment of Bitcoin as an emerging sort of monetary phenomenon that can accrue positive benefits to the US and our sort of our vision for a sort of liberal order around the world. And so you're not going to win that battle if you're just trying to narrowly address any particular aspect of Bitcoin's use in various criminal activities. I mean, you can try to refer to things like the chain analysis reports, but I think those are often, again, like a very narrow view of this overall phenomenon. And I think the key point is that I would make to Warren is, we need to actually do like a no kidding like national security strategic net assessment of Bitcoin across all dimensions of national power, and not just taking into account, the things that particular law enforcement authorities are going to view as a problem, and some of that is merited, but these larger kind of structural and strategic issues relating to U.S.-China competition, adoption in emerging markets, and some of these other potential strategic benefits over the long term that are hard to put in a particular bureaucratic box. And so that's usually would be my go-to is not to try to fight any particular aspect of sort of the narrow bureaucratic argument, but really to push for a strategic assessment that's done with rigor and across all domains of our national interest.
Now, Matthew is a little too humble to plug this, so I'll do it for him. But Mr. Pines actually wrote what I would say is the most comprehensive net assessment of Bitcoin and U.S. national security. It's a long paper, but if anyone is looking for some weekend reading, you can find that on our website, btcpolicy.org. I want to throw it over to Jason. Thanks so much for joining us. I know a large part of your job is really keeping up with the day-to-day minutia of what's going on the Hill. And recently there have been a number of hearings that have garnered attention. The House Agriculture Committee, Financial Services, there was a Senate Banking Committee hearing. Talk to us about what happened in those hearings and some of the observations that you have, and then we'll toss it to Zach.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, David. And it's really interesting, this whole topic. For the hearings, like the main hearing with the House Financials. Well, so there are three hearings, I guess. And the first one is the Senate Agriculture Committee that held a hearing on December 1st. And that was very interesting because a lot of people were looking to Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow and the ranking member John Boozman, who are both leaders of the Senate Agriculture Committee, of backing away from the DCCPA bill, which is really, I'd say there's 5 lanes to think about right now with Congress and the White House into 2023, and I'll review those really, really quick. But the issue that Stabenow and Boozman had is they took money from Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, like other politicians have. Some have, done the mea culpa, said they're going to put it to charity or put it toward, recouping the victim's loss. But and a lot of people thought the DCCPA bill might have been dead on arrival after what happened with Sam Bankman-Fried, because, and I'm sure Grant heard this too, the nickname for the DCCPA bill was the FTX bill, or Sam Bankman-Fried's bill, because he was so influential about it. So what people thought was that she might just do this mea culpa. We have to come up with a new bill now because Sam Bankman-Fried was really involved. But instead, they doubled down on the need for the bill. And they held this hearing on December 1st saying, we got to pass this bill. We're going to do what they described as a top-down approach to kind of look through maybe some areas where perhaps Sam Bankman-Fried consulted with them on, and they realized that he didn't know what he was talking about, or he's, doesn't have the best intentions. So that was their way to try to fix the bill, right? Just colloquially, the head advisor or chief of staff from one of the offices said to me that they wish they had never met, Sam Bankman-Fried. So the damage was palpable as far as what FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried are thought of now on the Hill, but still pushed forward this idea of one of the 5 lanes, which is to me is regulating the spot market of cryptocurrencies at the CFTC level, meaning Bitcoin would be regulated at the spot market level. So that was that one hearing. The other 2 hearings, Senate Banking and House Financial Services Committee, Patrick McHenry is really, I think, still is trying to negotiate with Maxine Waters on this idea of a stablecoin bill. So that's really what you want to look for there. They tried really hard to get, Sam Bankman-Fried to testify. Obviously, we know that didn't happen. And I think that hearing, you heard a lot of people who were, a lot of Democrats who are starting to dismiss the notion of crypto and blockchain. And I just agree with Grant to say that people see it as this like one item. It's hard for them to separate it all. And so that was troubling. I'd say before this all happened, Senator Elizabeth Warren was like the one detractor, really, and the critic, right? But she was sort of ignored. Now there's more people who are starting to pile on and join her in that effort, I think. And so that's the one sad thing I'd say I saw was a lot of people at the hearing starting to sort of just say, well, what is this all, worth anything? And so that was to be expected. But I think the Republicans really, towed the line on saying this isn't a failure of the technology. This is someone who's a bad actor. And John Ray did an outstanding job. I have to say, I'm really so sorry for him already. He looks so tired. And I mean, he dealt with Enron and everything. So ultimately for him to say this was the worst thing he ever saw after like Enron and other things, and that there was this paperless trail. I think at one point he was explaining that they use QuickBooks. I mean, a multi-billion-dollar company that wasn't, but it was using QuickBooks. I mean, the Congresswoman Wagner's response was just shouting out QuickBooks. I mean, you just couldn't believe it. It's like you literally got to make this stuff up. So it's just this unbelievable thing. But Ray did a really good job explaining the facts and really gave them more than they thought they would get because he's so early on. But he is trying to do the right thing and resolve it. Finally, David, the hearing at the Senate Banking Committee, which, again, stablecoins, House Financial Services Committee, I think they're running with that. AG's running at the Senate level how to regulate, the spot markets. Senate Banking, we didn't really know what they wanted to do, but to the point about the crypto, that was where, Warren sort of trotted out this idea and they had, these witnesses. But the main thing from that hearing was then that Senator Brown then put a retrospective of all of his efforts for Senate banking. And shockingly, he said, hey, I want to do legislation. He reached out to Janet Yellen asking what we could do and talked about what I'd say is sort of the third idea, which is regulating exchanges, or more specifically, so I used to be an FDIC regulator during the financial crisis, having the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and the OCC be able to regulate the affiliates, because how the affiliates work with each other in the banking system is something that's heavily regulated. There's 2 regs. It's Reg O and Reg W. Reg O is you can't loan too much money to insiders, which obviously happened with Sam Bankman-Fried. And Reg W is, you can't have affiliate transactions where there's this too close of a relationship like Alameda and so on. So, I mean, these are things that would have been caught if there was something in place to kind of look over the affiliate relationships. And I think they want to give the regulators that kind of power. And for Senator Brown, who had not wanted to do much on any kind of legislation, he put forward this idea of this is the number one priority. So he's moved it to the front burner. He's on his list is, it says crypto, but it says crypto policy legislation. Number one, Patrick Henry is becoming the chair at the House Financial Services Committee. So he's all about that. And so I think you're going to see this interplay. It's going to be really interesting to see how maybe Patrick McHenry, as a Republican, works with Senator Brown, who's a Democrat in the Senate, see what they might come up with regarding either stablecoin or crypto oversight type of regulations. The last 2 things I'll say real quick is just the 2 things I think you really got to watch out for that are deadly is the Senator Warren's bill, to me, also I would classify as a messaging bill. So the danger of what her bill did was it would send a lot of messages to FinCEN about what they could maybe do. And you might see some illicit finance rulemaking come up with Treasury that might try to address some of the things. And so she's almost lobbying FinCEN to kind of come up with these regulations on their own. And so that's the illicit finance thing is something really to watch. We'll have to have Matt come talk to them there. Although sadly, people realize this, but like, OFAC was sued over Tornado Cash by Coin Center. So now OFAC's not taking any meetings with anybody from industry anymore because they're saying, it's under pending, the court case. The final thing is the CBDC. This to me is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So like there was all these requests in the White House during the year, but the one bill that we don't know if it's needed or not, it was sent by the Department of Justice, Attorney General, over to Chief Counsel at White House with information as to whether they thought a bill was needed in the United States to allow a central bank digital currency. Republican leaders in the House have asked to see what the results were of that. There's been total silence. And the next thing they were supposed to say is, well, what the language of a bill would look like if it was needed. And so what I worry about is when you don't hear about things, I feel like this is a recreation of what we saw the way the Federal Reserve was created, where the creature of Jekyll Island, because I just feel like there's 10 people somewhere working out a CBDC bill that no one has access to, and they're not sharing any information about what they want to do about it. And then before we know it, it'll just appear in Congress and pass. So I would say CBDC should also be on people's radar. Thanks for having me up, David and Grant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go for it, man.
Thank you, Jason, and stick around because we may need your insights again. Stephen, if you have a question, go for it. But I was going to toss a question to Zach.
You're reading my mind, man. Zach, let's kind of rewind. I'm sure you were chomping at the bit a few minutes ago, and so we want to make sure and circle back. Obviously, I'm sure you have a few things to add. Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I guess I'd start by reiterating that this Warren bill, whether or not it's likely to pass, and I agree it seems unlikely to pass, is a total disaster. And on the earlier question about is this sort of a good faith mistake or an attack on Bitcoin/crypto, I just think if we're being honest about that, there are parts of this bill that pretty strongly point to the latter. So sort of just as a recap, what the bill does is it designates purveyors of unhosted wallets, meaning like actual non-custodial Bitcoin wallets, as money services business, which are both, really extremely expensive and difficult laws to comply with because you have to go through 50 state licensure.
Is it just silent for me?
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think it's just you, Steve.
Yeah, you're good. So
yeah, Zach, are you with us?
Yep.
Here, I'm going to text. I'll text Stephen.
So not only is it very expensive to comply with, but in the case of unhosted wallets, you just wouldn't be able to meet your reporting requirements, right? If you create an open source project like Blue Wallet and people are using that to send Lightning transactions, how would you possibly know who your counterparties and their counterparties are? And if we wanted to have a bill that had effective money transmitter licensing and effective money services business registration, there would be a way to do that, right? If you really wanted reform, you would create a federal level money transmitter licensing bill that would have one streamlined process where companies could go to FinCEN and they would know what their compliance requirements are, and you would make it less expensive to comply with rather than going sort of state by state in this sort of unworkable way that even in the status quo is incredibly expensive and difficult for companies to comply with, other than the biggest companies that have money for political donations. The bill also really goes hard at privacy, on-chain privacy. It basically makes tumblers and mixers and arguably coin joins, and honestly, the language around what a digital asset mixer in this bill is so broad. It could also apply to like Coinbase and the Bitcoin network itself. But any tool that can be used to anonymize transactions, it's illegal for any U.S. financial institution to do business with that, and it's basically illegal to touch any assets that have been through anonymizing devices. So not only is that terrible for privacy, but it's just not the approach you would want to take, even if you wanted to make sure that criminals were not using these tools for money laundering. What you would do is you would look at wallets that had large inputs into mixers. You would correlate those with criminal activity, And if anything, you would have legislation that points at wallets or UTXOs or crypto account-based models that are likely owned by bad actors. You wouldn't look at the asset itself. It's sort of like saying, this dollar bill has been tainted. Not the problem isn't that you got the dollar bill from a drug lord in a money laundering transaction. The problem is that the drug lord once touched that dollar bill, and that's just not the type of legislation I think you would write if you were, acting in good faith to make the industry sort of more orderly and work in a regulated manner. This really seems like someone who does not like the crypto industry and wants to go after it. I think this is one area where, as Bitcoiners, we can, there are a lot of other areas like proof of work energy usage, where it's an important topic to Bitcoin, less important for the rest of crypto, and digital asset securities laws, which is really important for the rest of crypto, not so important to Bitcoin. This is one area I think where we and the rest of the crypto industry can sort of link arms and say, being able to transact in a private and sovereign way is a human right. By the way, it's a right that's protected by the US Constitution. The idea that if you're going to be a publisher of open source code, you need prior permission from the government and you need to register, and they can serve as a prior restraint on your speech. That's unconstitutional under the First Amendment. The inability to use blockchain technology or Bitcoin to make confidential transactions to support causes that you believe in, that's a unconstitutional restraint on your free speech. And arguably many of the way these laws would operate would be violations of the Fourth Amendment. They would be effective, unreasonable search and seizures on not just specific transactions where the government has an interest in surveilling, but really all of your financial transactions. And so I think this type of legal language in these types of bills, whether or not Warren specifically will pass, is something we need to be on alert for and we need to guard against, and it's critically important.
Thanks, Zach. One of the things I really liked about the article you wrote for us was the point you made about the relationship between self-custody and consumer protection. This idea that self-custody and the right to self-custody, hold your private keys, is a vital component of consumer protection. Particularly in as much as the only way one could have avoided being the victim of FTX, BlockFi, Celsius, Voyager, whatever, is if they were self-custodying. And so it's interesting to hear a politician who's given so much lip service to protecting consumers propose legislation that would, as I understand it, effectively prevent one from holding their own keys, and in turn force them to trust a counterparty to hold their assets for them. And we've all seen how well that goes from Mt. Gox to today. So I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. Like you said, the bill kind of has stuff about that doesn't really relate to Bitcoin. But I think the two biggest pieces for me are the language about self-custody and the ability to run your own node. Like as Bitcoiners, those are sort of the two most important things one can do to use this asset and monetary network in the way that it was intended, to hold your own private keys and to run your own node. So could you explain for the audience the extent to which this bill actually would, the language here, and like Jason mentioned, even if it doesn't pass, this language might get recycled and used later, affects node running and self-custody specifically?
For sure. So there are a number of different ways that the bill threatens your ability to do both. It's not a ban on your ability to run a node, but you would have to get licensed by FinCEN, licensed by each state. And given that, as a node validator, you're validating transactions that go across state lines, you're probably looking at something between $500,000 and $2 million in legal fees to have a license to run your node. So if you got a lot of money lying around, probably you can afford the license to run your node. Otherwise, out of luck there. Similarly, with holding your own private keys, it's not a ban directly on holding private keys, but if you're wallet provider, right? The company that made the wallet that you're using to secure your own keys, whether that's a single sig wallet, multi-sig wallet, collaborative custody model with something like Casa or Unchained, they are going to have to surveil you in a way that they might not be able to comply with. And so wallet services could go away, at least in the United States. And maybe we'd be able to rely on open source wallets from abroad that are beyond the reach of the U.S. government, but then there are bans on United States persons interacting with foreign actors in this bill as well, using digital assets. So it really is sort of like a sneaky, backhanded way of serving as a ban on these activities, which are considered the best practices in the Bitcoin space, and also sort of what sets Bitcoin apart from other assets that tend to be exclusive, that tend to give better protections to moneyed, well-connected players. Whereas, Bitcoin, if you're holding your own keys, if you're validating your own transactions, you have the best assurances possible of your property rights and the best protections, as if if you own 50 cents worth of Bitcoin and you run your own node, you have the same protections for that 50 cents as Michael Saylor has for his billions in Bitcoin. And the idea that we'd want to undermine that with a bill like this, I think, runs counter to a lot of Senator Warren's stated values.
Yo, Jason, I saw your hand pop up. Go for it.
Real quick, question for Zach, and also, some people have started talking a little bit about after the Canadian trucking convoy and the use of Bitcoin, and then how that was sort of stopped by Canada. Congressman Warren Davidson introduced the KYC bill, which is Keep Your Coins Act. And people are starting to point to that because it would prevent any federal agency from ever prohibiting the use of custody. I don't know if you've seen that bill, Zach, but I wanted to put it on your radar. And people are seeing this as almost a response bill that already has been introduced, maybe could be reintroduced early next year, to kind of offset or push back against Warren's concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bills like that are very positive from a messaging perspective. My personal view is that the United States Constitution protects our right to self-custody digital assets, and that it would be illegal to pass a law that would ban that. And we don't necessarily need specific legislation, but it's good to have champions out there in the legislature, both reminding other legislators and Americans that we can and should have the right to self-custody digital assets like Bitcoin, and that that is an important thing for our lawmakers to be looking out for.
Jason, a minute ago, you kind of ended your conversation by talking about the way in which you might envision a CBDC being introduced, and obviously, this is an issue that not only affects the Bitcoin community, the crypto industry, but presumably, everyone in the world. Matt, I was hoping you could maybe give a sort of like, a broad bird's eye, like Bayesian assessment of like the different outcomes that could happen here. Because obviously it seems less likely that the government, like Jason mentioned, just sort of comes out and tries to pass legislation for a retail CBDC. There's clearly a ton of different ways that this could go, including the government backing down on CBDCs altogether. So could you walk us through sort of the big picture scenarios for how this could go? And if you're feeling like it, maybe give us some rough probabilities, at least in terms of what you think is most and least likely.
So yeah, I'll look through the crystal ball here.
Perfect.
So yeah. So a CBDC, right? It gets quite technocratic and devils in the details, but in terms of broad strokes, the two major kind of versions or flavors of CBDC that have been kind of debated in kind of the technocratic sphere are kind of wholesale CBDCs and retail CBDCs. The basic distinction is a wholesale CBDC would be closer to what we currently have in terms of the basic relationship between the average person and the Federal Reserve in terms of the money system we have, where it's a two-layer money system. The Fed's reserves are money for banks, and your deposits at banks are money for you. So average citizens do not have direct access to the Fed's balance sheet and do not use direct Federal Reserve liabilities as their day-to-day money, except for the cash you might have in your wallet. And so a CBDC as a retail version would basically provide the option, as it's sort of mostly phrased, as sort of a public option for money, where individuals can essentially hold direct liabilities of the Fed in a digital manner. And so there's lots of further distinctions of how that can be sort of implemented technically, but that's kind of like the big option on the table. The other option is essentially like an upgrade to the existing system of a sort of bank-to-bank clearance to use something that they might put under the banner of a CBDC, but would, for all practical purposes, be really just a kind of a technical back end change to how bank-to-bank sort of settlement works in the relationship between banks and the Fed. And there's a lot of countries around the world that are exploring sort of variations of those models. That's this sort of the topic du jour of most sort of international banking, regulatory, and finance discussions is sort of the future of money and digital money. And so the Bank of International Settlements is definitely very positive on CBDCs. Obviously, China is very positive on their vision of a CBDC, both domestically and as a way to kind of try to gradually internationalize the RMB within their kind of sphere of geoeconomic influence. The European Union is very sort of positive on CBDCs. Other countries have already implemented sort of some versions of this in smaller scale. But the United States is the big kahuna, right? Like the dollar is the global reserve currency. Whatever change we make to sort of the money system will kind of be pivotal for kind of what other actors in the sort of the world will follow. And this is a big debate happening kind of in the existing kind of power structure we have. Really is a balance of power in the money system between the Fed and the Treasury. And so the Fed, at least from what I've sort of been able to glean, is not too all that enthusiastic about the CBDC. If you look at some of the public statements made by some of the Federal Reserve sort of senior officials, they've sort of casted a doubt about what they think the problem a CBDC is supposed to solve. And the rumor mill is that Chairman Powell is also not that interested in taking this on, at least not during his tenure. Both because of the technical challenges, the operational challenges, and the political challenges, and he's already got a full plate of issues to sort of handle. Now that's a different story though in the Treasury Department, and there's some folks that have presence there that are aligned with a certain vision of the money system that is much more of a closer direct relationship between the state and individuals, and the idea of disintermediating the banking system is seen as a net positive for those folks. And so that's I think what Jason was alluding to is sort of the possibility that the Treasury has sort of come up with a proposal here that maybe the Fed would not necessarily sign on to, but they're trying to kind of spring a fast one and box the Fed in, because if you recall the executive order on digital assets, kind of prompted the Fed to reconsider its previous pretty much just like very slapdash report that it had put together on CBDCs that was very kind of dismissal of it, kind of like they just kind of had to do this homework assignment, but they weren't all that enthusiastic. And then the White House came back to them and said, please, we encourage you to take a second look at this. We think it's actually quite a good thing. So once you reassess. So that's I think where things lie. I don't know. So to kind of handicap this, right? It's kind of a game of politics and kind of who's got the juice behind the scenes to at least get their preferred kind of vision of this at least put down on paper in some fashion. But that's like just phase one, right? The steps between that and like an actual technical implementation of a CBDC is quite a long ways away, even if like the policy and legal decks were cleared, which is probably not my baseline assumption there. So I think there's a lot of momentum in certain corners to sort of push for a certain view of a CBDC, but I think they recognize there's a lot of political, operational, and technical constraints to really doing that, especially in the political time horizon that a lot of these folks, in their positions in the White House and the Treasury Department have. Right, this is not something you can just build and stand up in a short period of time. So they might just view a win as like getting approval to establish like a pilot program, which they've already started to do, in very kind of much more sandboxy ways, but to at least establish a precedent that this thing can have some legs and it gets some funding and can be kind of built and then grown over time as long as the political environment is favorable. So that's the things where things lie. But really, I view the debate about which implementation of CBDC, if there even is one, is it's a political question, right? How much folks actually in Congress will feel the heat from their representative, from their the constituents that this is something that they're not okay with. And then really, it's going to come down to kind of the the balance of power between the Treasury and the Fed, which historically has always sort of waxed and waned as the sovereign tries to take more control over its own financing and to sort of try to subordinate the independence of the Fed, in moments where their interests start to diverge. So I don't know. And I can't really put probabilities on it, but if you held me to it, like, will there be a globally implemented USD CBDC, by 2027? I would sort of say, less than 50%. That maybe even probably less than 25% would be sort of my baseline, but a lot can change.
Thanks, Matt. Fantastic stuff. Guys, everybody listening, just update you. We're Bitcoin Policy Institute. We're talking about Bitcoin in DC. Thanks for joining us. We're going to keep going here. David Zell, our co-founder, coming from the BPI account. David, I just want to kick over to you. And, we've talked about a lot so far. And we've really went down the rabbit hole on a lot of these items, which is awesome, even more than we expected to be able to do. Primarily because some of our fellows and friends have hopped on and contributed to the conversation. So thanks for doing that. David, to those sort of listening, thinking, all right, this all sounds good. I kind of have a pretty broad understanding of the status quo in DC and where things are and maybe where they could go one way or the other or a few different directions. Could you tell us just a little bit about what BPI and other advocacy organizations like us are working on, and what people are listening are like, I want to get involved. I want to call my mayor or whatever they need to do to sort of be a part of the solution here or be a part of the efforts that we're talking about. What would you have to say? What do you recommend?
Yeah. Well, there's sort of a host of lobbying organizations, trade associations, nonprofits that are doing similar work. We are a 501c3 public charity, so we're not lobbyists. We sort of focus entirely on education and advocacy. BPI is a think tank that we started a year ago. The way that we work is primarily by awarding fellowships to academics and other researchers who are thinking about similar questions as us, right? Like, what is the future of Bitcoin and the United States? And how can the US and other open societies leverage these monetary networks toward beneficial ends? Our sort of thesis in doing this is that unlike really any other mainline political issue or political debate, rather, that which is being debated is not totally set in stone. The terms are a little undefined. So take another issue like, I don't know, gun control or marijuana legalization or whatever it is. These policy debates happen within a pretty bounded, like, shared understanding and meaning. Like, no one is debating what a gun is. No one is debating what marijuana is. But people aren't really sure all the time what Bitcoin is. And so to have a conversation about, the policy implications of X, you need to know what X is. And so we viewed BPI as a way to kind of educate and to address that issue, right? To help define that which is being discussed. The other sort of reason for this strategic approach is that if you don't believe that Bitcoin is good, like if your sort of prior is that this is bad, it's going to be really hard to like lobby someone if that's their view. Like if you go tell them, like, for example, Zach wrote this great article for us explaining why, Warren and Marshall's bill would, effectively neuter the industry overall. But if your view is that, the industry is bad, then who cares? And if you're knocking down doors trying to explain to someone why certain policies wouldn't be good for Bitcoin, if you don't believe Bitcoin is good, if they don't believe Bitcoin is good, you're not going to get very far. So I'd say the main thing we do at BPI is, sort of produce research that advances a worldview that net Bitcoin is good for the world. And in particular is good for democracies like the United States. so I guess into the kind of nitty gritty of what we do, you can kind of bucket it, I guess, broadly in three ways. I mean, we sort of publish research, everything ranging from long form white papers and policy memos, all the way down to sort of like basic educational materials, like one pagers on Bitcoin and other various and other sort of important topics, right? So Bitcoin and energy, Bitcoin and national security, Bitcoin and financial inclusion, Bitcoin and CBDCs, all of this stuff, and disseminate that research mostly at the federal level, like to staffers on the Hill. The second is sort of education and advocacy. So Grant and I are in DC pretty often. Grant especially is up there a week or two out of every month. Just building relationships, being a resource, taking questions, taking meetings, and sort of funneling the really awesome research that our fellows do to decision makers in the government. We also host events in DC, like cocktail hours, dinners, lunch and learns, etc., and just try to provide some touch point to people who've thought deeply about these issues and have views that run contrary to some of the sort of apocalyptic visions of Bitcoin that some in DC have. And then third is sort of on the media side. So placing op-eds about Bitcoin in mainstream outlets, being a resource for journalists and reporters, all sort of toward this end of having a kind of serious dialogue about the benefits and risks that Bitcoin brings to the United States, but ultimately advancing this vision that we have of an America strengthened by Bitcoin. So that's sort of what we do. Another really awesome group that's been around for a long time is Coin Center. They're also a think tank, but they're a 501c4, and so they do a sort of direct lobbying. And so when bills have some probability of passing and there's language that needs to be changed, Coin Center is one of the sort of forces that's always there pushing back. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. You can go on our website just by searching Bitcoin Policy Institute or by going to btcpolicy.org. You can read some of the research that's been discussed today, like Zach's article, like Matt's white paper. But to the second part of your question, which was what can everyday people and Bitcoiners do? I think first is making your voice heard. There are, even though it sounds corny, like real benefits to making sure that your elected officials know how you feel about issues. And usually it's not that hard, right? Now, you don't want to necessarily flood a random office with an email every day about why you love Satoshi and why Bitcoin is the best thing since sliced bread, but making it clear, especially when sort of key legislation is on the table, making your voice and your opinion heard does actually matter. An example, I guess, that might help make that sound a little less naive and utopian would be, for example, gun control, where you poll Americans and say, do you support universal background checks? It's like 90% of Americans will say yes, depending on how you phrase the poll. And even if your focus group is just card-carrying NRA members, that number is still hovering around the low 80%. So if you were to kind of look at that without any other context and say, well, we live in a democracy and the overwhelming majority of Americans support universal background checks on private sales and transfers of firearms, you would expect maybe that policy would be passed. But it hasn't been. And this isn't really a political commentary on whether it should be, but it's more to make the observation that when you kind of peel back the curtain, the amount of phone calls that politicians receive over universal background checks are 7 to 1 against. So you got 90% of the country that supports this thing. You've got 80% of card-carrying NRA members that support this thing. But the most passionate people who are sort of single-issue voters on this topic are sort of by far and away the loudest voice. And so the point is just to say that a small share of the population for whom a certain issue is their most important can really wield a disproportionate or outsized impact on the conversation in DC. So I think making it clear to your elected official how you feel about these issues is important. Staying kind of aware of what's going on, is kind of necessary for that. And the other big thing people can do is to donate to the people that are doing work like us. No one is sort of making money educating Washington. And so if you've got the means, donating to organizations like ours or to Coin Center is a really tangible and great way to participate in this effort and to support education on Bitcoin. So that's a little bit about who we are, what we do, and some of the ways that I think it's best for someone to get involved.
Absolutely. Grant, I saw you had your hand up. Go for it.
Oh, yeah. Just wanted to say one of the big takeaways from a lot of my meetings as well is that industry, like the Bitcoin industry, is just not very well represented in DC. So you've got like industry organizations in DC that are representing crypto broadly, and they might have a couple of Bitcoin companies in there, but they're not representing the Bitcoin industry, right? We are not a 501c6. We're not an industry organization. I'm happy to connect any of my contacts with someone who works in the industry. I think that's extremely valuable, but we're not going in there saying, hi, on behalf of Bitcoin miners, we think this, or hi, on behalf of, exchanges, Bitcoin exchanges, here's what we think. So if you work in a Bitcoin, company, if you know someone who does, I would be happy to put you in touch with certain offices, and at the very least, go talk to a staffer, take a half-hour, Zoom call, and just say, hey, here are some of the issues that we're facing from a regulatory perspective, or hey, here's how this bill would affect my company specifically. Bitcoin makes up over 40% of the crypto market cap. It does not get 40% of the advocacy in DC. So, as a pleb, you can do your part. As someone working in the space, I would definitely encourage industry to get involved. And I know this is something that Bitcoin Today Coalition has been doing, bringing down, some miners and people who work with some mining companies, down to DC. And that's great. So, if you're in the industry, I would say a 30-minute call goes a long way because let me tell you, they're not hearing from you. They're hearing from the SBFs and the FTXs of the world. They're hearing from Circle. They're hearing from Ripple. They're hearing from pretty much anybody but Bitcoiners. So do with that information what you will.
And I see Bitcoin Magazine, i.e. Chris, has a question.
Yeah, no, this has been great stuff. Zell and Grant, I know we probably have 8 more minutes before
Maybe
we want
not.
to wrap up. Can you hear us?
Yep.
I can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you guys want to wrap up in the next 8 minutes or so? If we want to do a round table, kind of go through, ask everyone their final opinions, and then
Yes.
We wrap up.
You beat me to it by about 30 seconds. Thank you, Chris. And thanks, Bitcoin Magazine, for hosting with us today. So we're just going to do a quick lightning round. I know we're all bumping up against 1:30. With this, I just kind of want to go around to everybody here, and I'll call you out one at a time. Grant, I think I'll just start with you. But we just want to hear. Can you tell everyone one thing that you're, and you maybe a recap here, one thing that you're concerned about, and then one thing that you're hopeful about, or you're more optimistic about heading into 2023.
Sure. I'm concerned that we have, actors from the OC representing, the crypto industry in Congress. So if you saw the Senate banking hearing, Ryan from the OC gave, submitted a testimony. That's super concerning. Again, industry needs to be better represented. Stuff like that, is funny. It's haha funny, but it's also it pisses me off. So that concerns me. And one thing I'm optimistic for, like I said, is the fact that whatever comes out of Congress in 2023, if anything, is going to have to be bipartisan. And to the point about, something like the Warren legislation earlier, that is like a signaling legislation. It pushes the Overton window very far in that direction. But I'm confident that, we can push the Overton window in the other direction as well. So whatever comes is going to have to be bipartisan. It's likely going to be more piecemeal, and looking forward to just continuing to differentiate Bitcoin from the rest of the industry, and some events that we're going to be doing in DC in 2023. So, if you're interested in our work, if you're interested in Bitcoin, not crypto, and Bitcoin specific advocacy in DC, stay posted because BPI is going to be doing some cool stuff, and I'm really excited to share with you in maybe days, maybe a couple weeks when I'm able to share all the details. But we've got some really, really cool stuff coming up for Q1 and Q2 of 2023.
Can't wait. And we're going to be doing these pretty regularly, probably every week, every other week for a while now. So the foreseeable future. Jason, Brett, I'm going to kick over to you. One thing that you're kind of concerned about, one thing that you're optimistic about or hopeful about, and then we'll go over to Zach and Matt and finish up with David.
Oh, thanks. Real quick, thanks again for having me. The one thing I'm concerned about is the CBDC question, because since we don't know yet what the recommendation was on legislation for CBDC, it could be quite onerous. I mean, we saw what happened in China. We like to think that can happen here, but unless we're going to have public discourse and share what the findings were from the Department of Justice that was sent to the White House as part of the executive order, we're all left in the dark. That's where, the biggest problem is. What I'm most optimistic about is that I think FTX has proven the case for Bitcoin and sharpened our skills when it comes to things like self-custody and others. And, as the expression went in World War II, if you're not taking flak, you're not over the target. So things like Warren bills are going to appear, but it means that Bitcoin and the ideals that we all hold with Bitcoin, property rights, privacy rights, things like that, are definitely running strong.
Awesome. Zach, what's your, let's take, 60 seconds each here, concern and what you're hopeful about?
So I think my biggest concern is just the lack of understanding among lawmakers. I think that provides an unfortunate opportunity for actors who are trying to hurt the Bitcoin space to put forward, bad policy in the wake of FTX and to sort of muddy the waters. And I think that there's a lot of energy and money out there for lobbying around, making altcoins not securities, right? I think legislators understand that pretty well. Lobbyists are very keen on that topic, and there's plenty of effort in that side of the house. And there's much less in sovereign Bitcoin usage, making sure that we have sensible money services business laws and the types of things that will actually help deliver the promise of Bitcoin and digital assets, as just opposed to how you make money using them. On the flip side, I think what I'm optimistic about is a lot of what I'm seeing in the Bitcoin industry, people building amazing businesses to make Bitcoin more useful, whether those are for-profit venture-backed businesses, whether those are open source projects like we've seen Jack donating to. And I'm optimistic that over the next year, the Bitcoin industry and organizations like BPI that help get our priorities out to legislators will work closer together, and we can make real progress in helping move more of the Bitcoin industry in the United States and supporting our companies in the same way that the rest of crypto seems very well represented by Coin Center.
Awesome. All right, Matthew Pines, you're up.
Yeah, so I would second Zach's and Jason extent. Pessimistic about just basic knowledge, right? It's kind of frustrating at times just seeing the same sorts of misconceptions replayed over and over again. But that kind of feeds into my optimism, because it seems like there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And then that, in fact, there's a lot of asymmetric value and benefit that can come from, just putting the right sort of messages in the right minds. And that is it seems like a challenging task, but it's really not, right? A lot of these arguments are really well made. They're just not really effectively delivered in the format and the means that the policymakers are used to hearing. And so I think that's really where big BPI's like like key advantage is being able to sort of translate the things a lot of Bitcoiners know and talk about all the time, but translate it to that audience and do it in a way that's clear, concise, and compelling. And so we've already seen like really good examples of that being successful, even in kind of the nascent efforts, the past year or so. And so I'm really bullish on that into 2023.
Amazing. All right, David, we've got about 45 seconds. Take us home, and we'll tell everybody goodbye on that note.
All right. Well, hard to come up with anything else after all of that, but I guess what I'm most bullish and bearish about with regard to Bitcoin and policy over the next year is probably the same thing, which is the bear market. It's difficult to overestimate the extent to which the landscape is different when the entire industry is down like 70% or whatever. It's sort of the time to strike if you are anti-crypto, because a lot of Americans have lost a lot of money investing in digital assets, and so I view in Washington is going to be that Bitcoin and crypto overall are sort of on the back foot, and that now is the time to kind of press the gas and apply pressure. On the other hand, I think bear markets are an amazing time to educate about Bitcoin. When Bitcoin is $68,000 and there's just like massive euphoria, you sort of get the eye roll and the sort of view by anyone you're meeting with that, oh, well, you're just here because you've made money in Bitcoin, and there's just a blatant kind of self-interest that can cloud what would otherwise be a sort of good dialogue. However, when Bitcoin is down, as much as it is, and you're up on the hill knocking on doors, taking meetings with people, I think it's a little bit easier to explain the like ideological, strategic, like moral value of Bitcoin, because people say, "Wow, like you're sitting here educating me about this asset that's down 70%. Maybe there's actually something deeper here." Because I think if you knew nothing about crypto or knew nothing about Bitcoin, you might expect people to kind of recede back into the ether when the price is down so much. So I think the bear market is a risk, but I also think it's an opportunity to have.
Shocked, and if you like, I can even send you my wallet address. You can verify that. I haven't even been paid. I've never asked for money. It's just to help with transparency on my end as an individual. I'm a bit at a loss for words. So I can't justify nor can I defend what's going on in TR just because I don't have everything in full context. But if you or anybody else wants to ask me a question, I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. But if I don't have an answer for it, I'll tell you straight up I don't have an answer for it. Is that fair?
I think it's great, man. I think that you hit the nail right on the head. It definitely is a shit show indeed.
Yeah.
I think that the situation at hand is crystal clear, and basically what we have here is we have $150,000, okay, that was taken from the community pool. We were told beforehand that money was going to go for development on the chain. So we took it as, hey, they're going to pay developers. They're going to pay people that actually are doing the work, getting things back up and operational. It's going to be fantastic. Hey, okay, no problem. Well, after the money was received by TR, it was then split up into multiple wallets. It was also staked into their own personal value.
Wait, Diamond Hands.
Okay.
Prior to it passing, Diamond Hands, they saw that it was going to pass, and they had an internal vote to kick people out of the team down to 11 people.
Oh, that's correct. Thank you, Laquan, for correcting me. Thank you. Yes, they lowered the team down to 11 people. It passed. Now, keep in mind, too, PSX, that prior to receiving the funds, they told the public, we're going to be transparent with you. We're going to give you, yeah, sure. We'll tell you where it's going. We'll let you know who's getting paid. We demanded this over and over and over again. Okay. Demon's in here and is a witness to that. Okay. Once they received the funds, the whole narrative immediately changed. We have screenshots from Rex. We have screenshots from TR members who basically people are going and asking, Can you tell us where these funds are going? Who's getting paid? Be transparent with us. Their response was, that's not your concern. We don't have to tell you what we're doing with it. It's our own business, and basically F off is what they were saying. So respectfully, when I see something like that, that's a huge red flag and a problem and an issue. The biggest one being the moderator is getting paid almost $13,000 a piece. Now, I've been in crypto for a long time. I've met mods, I've hired mods, I've paid mods myself from a wallet.
Did they justify? Did anybody did the I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around how that decision was made. 13,000 for a mod.
It was actually, to be exact, 12,500, and that was actually confirmed by Rex.
It was 11,500. 11.
Yeah, I have a screenshot from Rex actually confirming that I was paid 72 million lunk, and basically that's not even concern. So
okay, yeah, I can empathize how the community is going to feel. Really, more like that's a slap in the face. Given some of the behaviors that I'm briefly seeing throughout the social media platforms. Sorry, I'm just. I'm a little annoyed.
If you're being honest and open and stuff, then it doesn't sound like your fault. It sounds like it's other people who've arranged this and taken the money themselves.
Right.
And we're not here to put pressure on you, man. I know you.
No. It's fine. It's fine. I'm just trying to.
Well, you don't need.
Just trying to find.
You don't need to explain it either. Like it's clearly down to other people more. But the fundamental thing is there was a proposal for $150,000, and stated goals of that were the infrastructure, the Rebel station, and the API handover from TFL. And it was stressed that it was urgent and necessary immediately, which also turned out to be a lie, by the way. And then immediately after that money was paid out, it was distributed $12K ahead to moderators. It didn't.
I was on a phone call with Dignan, and I asked if like a list of an itemized list was that provided to the community. He said yes, and who does that go through? I was told that was Echelon's responsibility. Did anybody?
No, not only that.
There's no itemized list.
Not only that, but when people asked in this community, and many people here, they said none of your business what we do with the funds.
I bet. I'm sorry. They said that. A member of TR said that.
Yep, you can check my timeline. You can check anyone's timeline. Rex and Clan Mudhorn and others said none of your business what we do with the funds.
For the sake of my time and everybody else's time, if one of you guys can just send me a link to that, so I just do a quick review. There's so much going on in Twitter space and kind of reviewing everything. It just before I draw any conclusions. But I'm a bit baffled. I'm a bit baffled that kind of response was given to the community.
I pinned it at the top some of the extracts. There's more than this, but this is just the initial stuff.
Yeah, I just need one example. I don't need.
Yep, look at the top.
Okay.
You can also go to the Terra Rebels Discord and just go to general chat and type in clan or at whoever, and you can see all the things that they've posted recently.
All right.
There's dozens of them.
Yeah, like immediately when the money was paid out, suddenly none of our business, and also Vegas and others calling it FUD. Amazingly.
No, it's a fair. I mean, typically in any kind of because the community is the investor or the client. It's like that's you have a fiduciary duty to yourself to be making sure that things are getting itemized and audited.
Yep. It's very simple.
So I don't understand this response is what I'm trying to get my head wrapped around.
It's very simple. You say what the proposal is for, where it's going, the technical work, so the infrastructure work, the Rebel Station work, and the API work, and then the money goes there, and it's fully itemized and it's transparent. It's our money. That's where it goes. It went somewhere completely different for completely non-technical people as apparently entitled back pay.
Right. No, I mean, there's no argument there.
Nobody would have an issue if they put a proposal up and they said, you know, we've been working for a long time and we feel we deserve 150K for the moderation we've done in the Discords, and we feel we deserve 12.5K each, and you know, this is where it's going to go. And then the community can vote on that. But this is not what they voted on. This money was stolen.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any words. Like I've just been busy with my real life and just kind of sticking my head
Welcome
back
man.
Yeah, so just to kind of give you guys, like, before this whole incident, just some additional context of my role, you know, with the YouTube channels, the LinkedIn's, the videos that you guys were seeing, that was all me. You know, I was bringing 9 years of experience to the marketing and advertising and communications structure to the TR team. To my understanding, before that, there was a lot of infighting. So we created a separate server to insulate the team from any potential internal politics. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. But I mean, at least for the small time that things have been kind of moving really smoothly, I'm proud, at least for what many of the individuals on that marketing team have managed to pull before this fiasco took place, if you will.
Did you say you brought 9 years of experience to TR as far as marketing goes? Okay, so did you get paid at all out of that 150K?
No. I can send you my wallet. You can do your own auditing if you like.
I don't need to see your wallet, man. I just needed an answer.
Oh, yeah. But Diamond, just for the sake of, I guess, transparency, I sent you my wallet and you can look into it yourself.
So you brought 9 years of experience. You brought 9 years of experience to marketing for TR, but everybody else stating that they're under marketing has gotten paid, aside from the one with the true experience. It makes no sense to me.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. That's all I need to hear, really. That hits the nail on the head. Guys, you all don't realize, I used to investigate people for a living. I fed my family by investigating and putting people in prison. That's what I did for years. I'm saying this as politely and as professionally as I possibly can.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I'm not asking TR to pay. Like, I mean, I did this voluntarily just because.
Right.
I mean,
they did it voluntarily as well, man. You don't need to explain yourself, man.
Yeah, just for clarity here, we're annoyed at the people who orchestrated this. We're annoyed at the people who knew it and didn't speak out, and we're annoyed at the people who took the money. And it doesn't sound like you're one of those people. So don't feel like your head is on the chopping block or something like that. You see,
no, you're not. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to provide clarity, or at least I think this is more so for me because I'm trying to get clarity from both sides. There's a, you know, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time digging into it, but I'm just trying to streamline my end just to kind of, I don't know, try to make sense of everything because it's so chaotic. And everybody's angry and frustrated, and it's like I get it. You know, when TR was slowly losing the talent that people were looking up to, and like, yeah, I can see there's going to be some anger. And at least briefly reviewing some of the responses that Clan Mudhorn has given, I'm not impressed. A lot of cringing on my end. So, but yeah, I mean, my head hurts.
Next, I want to bring up Venus 199. I know that they were part of TR as well. I want to bring up Venus and hear from them, please. Venus, we're talking about or actually, I'm going to wait until they get connected. So, okay. Venus, I brought you up to ask your opinion on this matter. We've got PSX here. We've got you here now as well, Venus. I understand that you decided yourself to also walk away from Terra Rebels. Can you kind of explain to us and the audience of why you made that decision, please?
All right, I just have something to say to PSX first. Because you're running your own investigation, you may not actually be able to see everything that's within the internal governance of TR, because the set have access to a separate channel, from what I understand, within Microsoft Teams that is not available or even visible, or at the time that I was part of TR, to the members of the inactive set. So even if you were to look, you wouldn't be able to find the direction of the organization that you are being part of. So you have no right to vote.
I don't need a right to vote, nor do I care. I'm not much of a politics, and I don't need permission from anybody.
But this is where
You knew that. Yeah. I just, I'm not here to deal with stupid politics, be it internal, external. I just want to try to get things, find some consistency in what's going on, where the disconnects are, and figure out if I can close it. Is that fair?
That's fine.
That being said,
but this is where in that channel, this is where decisions are being made. This is where the second proposal, when I found out about it, I left TR.
Okay. I think what she's trying to say, PSX, is while you're doing your investigation, there is a place that has information that would probably help you in your investigation, but you don't have access to that. And she's just informing you that there is a place like that that you don't have access to.
Wasn't it, to my Venus, and maybe you can provide clarity, the way TR was structured originally when I was onboarded in early October, wasn't it to my understanding that that it was only team leads that could vote? It wasn't really the people that, I guess, that follow the team lead, if you will, subordinates. I know it's like the whole idea of a flat structure that Raider wanted. I mean, even that doesn't even make sense to me, or never did.
It was supposed to be tallied up by each individual group, and then the team lead would, depending on which way it went, that's the way the team lead had to vote, so to say. So kind of like how our elections go here.
Like a Senate. Yeah. Rex, even though he was
that's not the case
supposedly
anymore.
Team lead for
inactive members don't have access to voting at all, or even to see the proposal.
So, because to provide additional clarity, Rex, who was the team lead for marketing, never consulted with anybody, at least to my knowledge, even on the TR marketing server, never consulted with anybody regarding certain decisions being voted on. So, I mean, I would probably argue that he never represented the marketing team's best interest. I'll say that publicly. I don't care.
Yeah.
Folks, can I just say one thing now? I think that there's no more use for us to, I mean, you can, I mean, I want you to do your investigation and all that, but like I said, I was an investigator for years. We pretty much know the answers to all of these questions. And again, Clan Mudhorn's not in here. I'm no longer seeing Raider on the Terra Rebel Discord. I'm not seeing a bunch of people that used to be in there. Their names are now removed. I pretty much know exactly all the answers to these questions. So also Luquan got banned just now, asking them to come in and speak. I guarantee you, if I went into that Discord right now and tagged Clan and said, "Hey man, you need to come into Lunk Live. You got some questions you need to answer," I'm about 95% sure he probably banned me on the spot as well. So I'm not even going to give him the common courtesy of doing that. So what I would say is this: we have a lot of key members in here, very well known, humble, pure people. And I would say it again. It's time for us to create a new team.
Yeah.
We have very well-versed, talented individuals in this space right now currently. I'll say it again. We've got Lunkdale, we got Damon, we got Rexy, we got you guys. Why can we not start from scratch, press the reset button, get things back online to where we know what needs to be done, right? There's no going back now, okay? We've got to keep moving forward. So the 150K, as far as I'm concerned, Luquan's already said it. They got their information. We'll let the agencies handle that, but for the short term being, we got to move forward, baby. This is a hiccup. This is a bump in the road. TR's decisions, whatever they did, it's not holding us back. They're not the owners of this chain. They were a contracted organization, a private organization. They're not the owners. The people are the owners. The people run this show. So if we want to be successful, then by God, let's start making moves. We're not going anywhere. I can tell you that for a fact. So if we want to be successful, let's get organized, get a hold of Ed Kim, get a hold of Zardar, get your people together. Enough talk. Let's execute. I'm sick and tired of this. I come from a law enforcement background. Demons come from the military side. We know, we're around those people. You find a way to win, okay, at all costs. We've been losing forever. We lost in May. It's time to get organized now. Enough of the dog and pony shows. Enough of this bullshit. Let's get back to business and make the right moves. Right now, somebody should be getting on the horn right now to CZ and Binance and tell them, hey, look, just want to let you guys know there's a new sheriff in town. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on. Those people are gone. There's new leadership now. And what we're here to tell you is we're going to do things the right way. We're going to be open, transparent, honest. We're going to give these people what they deserve, and we're going to get this thing back on the map. All the old players, all the clowns, they're gone. New people are here, baby. That's what you need to start thinking. Don't think that this fight is over. It's not. Now it's just getting good. Now it's just getting spicy. Everybody listening to my voice right now, you should be sitting there shaking your head like, yep, I like it. Let's do it. I'm tired of seeing people take advantage of good people. That was my job. My job was to go after those people who would go after the children, who would go after the elderly, who went after people that couldn't take care of themselves or defend themselves. That's what I did. I was a protector of those people. Okay? Now I'm trying to protect you all. You're being taken advantage of. They took you for a ride. You should know that by now. And now we have to push forward. That's it. That's it. Okay? Venus, you got your hand up, and we'll go to PSX. Go ahead.
Me first or PSX?
You go ahead and go.
Go ahead, Venus.
So there were a series of 2 proposals. Was public in the Discord server, and that was to separate the group into 2 sets, one inactive and one active. The inactive set would receive, I think, 6 million for their past work. I was part of the inactive set, and I took the 6 million. If people are gonna give me shit about it in the future, the wallet is pretty sort of public, and I have shared that with TR before. So I can send the money back to the community pool with interest earned from the Oracle pool, whatever. I don't have an issue with that. I've delegated half of that with Onyx, which is actually working to several projects in Lundsea, and I thought that would be a nice thing to support. And half of that was redelegated to Unity Validator, which also are working to support the Lundsea community. And I thought that would be the kind of a good thing to do. But again, I did took the money, and I am more than happy to send that back to undelegate, and whenever time comes to send it back to the community.
And
So
Onyx is
not
the validator that you're a project manager for, right?
Sorry.
I said Onyx is the validator that you're a project manager for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. I appreciate you.
Okay.
Venus, Duncan is part of Onyx, right? That's
Yes.
Duncan's thing. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd say keep it in the validators. It allows more spread out voting power, makes the blockchain safer. That's actually not a bad investment for the community.
So as I said, if community wants to, like, I have no problem with that. This is why I kind of kept it in that sort of public wallet. If like, I would share that wallet if anybody wants it. That's not an issue, but that's kind of my judgment for that. And it was for past work, and I was like, considering that I've been since, I don't know, July or something around here, I might just as well take that and do something with it. And I thought that would be a good idea. But, if it comes to it, I have no problem with that. As for organization, I am working with Guidican for organizing like a big Loan C meeting. Part of that, I'm trying to organize two things. One, a big phone call with all the builders. Okay, so this is not people that are sitting in the back and talking and are being the backseat drivers, just the builders, just to have a get together and direction and purpose for Luna Classic. And I will make a public announcement when it comes to it. And I need to test the Discord server, right? So I want to put a lot of people from the Cosmos and from Luna Classic into a Discord server to act as a phone book, because at the moment we are lacking connections. And that gatekeeping connections is one of the worst things you can do in a business, and is detrimental for the Luna Classic and for the Cosmos in general. When you are in a Discord where you can make connections, that's where business happens, that's where money are made, that's where growth comes from, and that's kind of how I do that. Now, Guidican kind it's because this is not set in stone yet. When it is, I'll make a public announcement. But it is Christmas time, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. And after Christmas is most likely the time where this is going to happen. So Guidican wants to make this a big meeting, and he also suggests Twitter. So there is a possibility there of being organized on Twitter as well. I have no idea, but I know for certain that I'm working towards a Discord thing. So if it's going to happen on Discord, it's going to be recorded. I'm looking at how to record it, and I'm going to test that with Duncan, and there are several people that volunteer to help. And if it's going to be on Twitter, then it's going to be recorded automatically. So that's something interesting and to look forward to.
Venus, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so when you were with TR, what work did you do specifically while you were with TR?
I work towards organizing teams, towards sharing information between teams. So basically sort of a project manager role. That would be like the most accurate description. Proofreading, I did writing, I did just communication between teams and communication within teams and pulling people together, and that's kind of was my role. So it's very invisible to the outside, and I suspect this is kind of why I wasn't put in the active set, and I was put in the inactive set because my work was not visible. And this is something that other people have been told, and reason why they've been kicked out of the team, because it wasn't something visible to the public.
Okay. Diamond Hands, we could go to Hands unless you or Demon have, or Bruce have any questions for her.
The only thing that I want to just say, I see that Clan Mudhorn and Rex are very active now in the Terra Rebel Discord. You know, it'd probably be better for you guys to come in here instead of just talking to everybody in there. That's just a little point I'm trying to make there. I mean, because this is your moment. I mean, people basically are calling you out, and you continue to stay over there. So just throwing that out there. Go ahead, PSX.
Yeah, sorry, I've got about 3 minutes before I have to hop into a meeting for some still at work. Yeah, just a quick add-on. So at least to my understanding, I mean, the good news is I mean, the Luna Classic community as a whole, and it's always been this way that, you know, it doesn't need TR. It's just TR is just one small slice out of the pie when there's a bigger pie to go after, and I'm pretty sure there's many talents. So I mean, the least I can do is I'm going to post up here in a bit on how the marketing team was structured to help produce content and communicate with the communicate to the public, and how to curate these messages where you know, retail investors don't feel like they're getting overwhelmed with information. And anybody can take that structure, and I'll be more than happy to advise and consult on best practices and ways to execute, because it seems to me that there's been a poor execution on TR's part. If that helps, just to kind of think of it as like a tutorials, quick workshops, man, I feel like I kind of let the Luna Classic community down as a whole, because originally we were trying to put together like tutorials and educational material, but for some of us that have real jobs, full-time positions, I mean that type of workload is, there's a bit of a process to it. Does it make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense. I think that's what the people need.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people too, like, just right now, man, we've got 246 people listening to this Twitter space. People like Twitter spaces. I've said this for the longest time. For the love of God, why couldn't TR or whoever our leaders are, whoever our builders are, why can they not? I mean, you guys are geniuses, right? You're expert coders, senior developers, but for the love of us, why could you all not get into a Twitter space? And we approached them. We told them, guys, you gotta do it monthly. Do once a month. Do like a town hall. Tell the people, right, what's going on.
I can address that question directly here in 30 seconds. So I created a position within marketing called the program manager, and if you guys can take, well, this call is being recorded, so this is good, but take some notes. The program manager, and based on Clan's first performance, I thought he would be a good fit since he was already the face of the administration side. So I invited him to take that role, and the program manager's position was designed to house just that type of communications, where this individual would come out to spaces, manage AMAs, come up with different processes, get creative, have fun, engage with the audiences. And it was designed to mitigate any, say, like, for example, like a proposals. And I've seen a lot of these proposals, and I'll be frank with you, I'm not an expert, even in the slightest, to even make sense of a lot of what I read. I'm not a quant by a stretch of the imaginations. So one of the challenges I came across, and I realized how much energy and time it takes just to take all that information and break it down, and make it make sense to even my mom, if you will. And that was the purpose of the program managers, to take that information and really help mitigate that. So, for example, like, I see the terror station, the rebel station, and it seems like it caught my impression is that it caught a lot of people off by surprise. So the best practice for something like that was to have, in this case, Clan Mudhorn to come out to the public and kind of do like its own AMA to present a new product, even though his argument was it's not a new product. It's like the general public is going to see it as a new as a product. So you need to address that, like what it does. Do people have to move everything over? Does it change? Like it helps you address these information, so you don't have to catch yourself off where everybody's rushing to the Discord and you feel overwhelmed. So that's the Does that make sense? Why the program manager position was designed? Hopefully I'm articulating that correctly, because I'm running a little bit out of time.
No, it makes sense to me. I mean, it's
like what you're doing right now would be considered program manager.
Yeah, I mean, and the beautiful thing about it is, there's certain individuals that have skills in that. There's people around the world that actually do that for a living, that have actually spoken in front of hundreds of people, thousands of people, and have had to talk about very important issues, right? So if that person is not skilled in that field, they need to be removed. And there needs to be somebody that actually can fit that narrative and fit that position, and they need to be in charge. So we always question that. We're like, why in the world can these cats not get this together? It's not hard. You just go and say, hey, boys, we're going to have a AMA this coming Thursday. We're going to talk about Rebel Station. We're going to talk about XYZ 1, 2, 3. Make sure you guys be there. Please attend. Put your alarm clocks on. Put your reminders on, and let's talk about it, right? But it seems like just the most simplest tasks that are not difficult to achieve just couldn't.
So here's what I'll do before I hop off. Fuck, I'm already late. Hang on. Yeah, here's what I'll do. I was putting together some training manuals to help streamline everybody's process within the TR marketing team. I never got around to completing it, but once I complete it, I'll release it to on my Twitter handle. God forbid, it may take me forever to get around to it because I'm so swamped with work. But I'll try to get it to you to everyone here within maybe 2 weeks. So you can use that as a way to help execute how you want to market yourself or whatever you're trying to build, best practices, what not to do. If you guys have any questions, I'll try to get with you guys as quickly as I can. But just know that I'm super swamped on my end already. But at least consider it as a gesture of free will. I guess. Sure. I think. Hello? Am I talking to myself? Is my phone on?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, we're listening.
Okay, but yeah, just a gesture of goodwill. And then you guys can use that as a learning material or training material for you and your team. How's that? Does that work? Maybe I'll start a marketing workshop.
Yeah, I mean, that's all great and everything. I mean, guys, I think the issue at hand here is not trying to explain to the public about how TR's marketing works and the way that it should have been done and things of that nature. I don't really think at this point people really care. I think what they care most about is why was $150,000 taken from the community pool? You see what I'm getting at? So
and that was the whole. That was, I mean, again, it goes back to the program manager. Like that stuff should have been set up before. But I guess some of the things that I was teaching, at least what I was trying to teach, didn't go through. So that's probably my fault. That happened.